So this group was the content and browser, wasn't it? The content browser.
Oh,
what was the title of the group originally?
Team Awesome.
Team Awesome. We're going Team Awesome.
Yeah, getting the controls into the browser somehow, I think was basically the gist of it. It might have changed slightly throughout the day, but yeah.
What was our actual?
It was originally about the content browser blending.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think we were unsure when we got started about our constraint level. Some of us were a bit more blue sky, and some of us were very, very familiar with the tangible issues. So I don't think we really kind of cleared that up, but we still got some ideas out that I think were valuable. This is just something I just threw together just now because I wanted to try and summarise this for the website or something. I don't know if it's a decent idea, but just to communicate how things are being chained together. But towards the end of the day, I tried to summarise some design principles that we may or may not agree on in our group. So yeah, if we just yeah. So some potential design principles. We ended up thinking about how maybe we don't mess with the content unless the publisher has explicitly allowed that to happen. We ended up talking about, I think there's sketches later on this, but so there being two levels, like a browser level web intent and then like specific content level web intent, which the publisher defines. Not total agreement on that, but might be a way of thinking about a division between very broad things like URL sharing could happen at browser level because it's about the whole page, and then something specific like editing an image's content, it's very atomized. It would be up to the publisher to define. So that's where that one came out of. And the browser Chrome and the interface page are totally separate. Stroke page are separate things. So I started sketching like hovers on top of the page, and then we started discussing, oh, well, you know, we don't want to throw in more stuff onto the page, right? So let's ditch that idea. Next one. So one thing that happened was we started out including a kind of registration step in our flow. So you go to Photoshop.com and then it says, hey, do you want to add a web intent along the way? And then we thought, well, actually maybe that when you are at publishers and you want to edit an image, there is a central repository of places you can edit images, and they don't even require registration. So you can just kind of be doing one thing on the site where you need to edit an image, go and use another service, come back, no registration, totally seamless user experience. But I guess there's a political question there about who appears at the top of the list of editing software, for example. Smart defaults, that's not really a specific design principle. We should all be doing that most of the time in our practice, so whatever. So I've talked about it already. URL page level actions done by the browser. It could be a strategy to resolve the question of how, is this a browser thing or is this like a content publisher thing? So that's kind of the principles that sort of summarise the things we were thinking about, and then we've got a whole bunch of sketches. Or somebody else want to talk through some stuff?
Yeah, I'll just sort of talk about some of these sketches. There's a few kind of principles buried in these sketches, and I'll try and draw those out a little bit. So, hopefully this gives the impression that we're really trying not to add too much clutter. If anything, we want to remove buttons and get rid of visual noise. And part of our strategy for that, I think what we think is really important in getting the web actions into the browser is to kind of put those controls in places where the user is already doing that thing. So, for example, they click the little star to add a bookmark. It says bookmark added, and then there's this like really kind of neat little link, tick box rather, to sync with Delicious. Now, there's quite a lot going on behind the scenes in order to generate that sort of simple little interface. It's only showing that link to people that, like the user agent, thinks are actually Delicious users. So that could be based on their browsing history, a bookmark, maybe that they might have bookmarked Delicious, that maybe they've got a bookmark alert, and I think the browser even knows about their passwords, so sites that they've got passwords for. So I think there's a lot of intelligence in the user agent that we can bring to bear when we're trying to decide where to sprinkle these little bits of functionality in the browser. So the principles there, kind of sprinkle the new functionality in the browser. Don't clump it all in a special web intents box. Hijack existing browser functionality. We've talked a bit about the idea that in most browsers there's a share this link control that no one really ever uses. It's a bit of a shame. So you go into File and email this link, and it actually creates a little email for you to send. We could hijack that and use it as a generic sharing thing. I haven't actually got a screenshot of that. So moving on from that little bookmark thing, showing things in relevant situation. I thought it might be nice to use that little space, that little the drop down that you get when you bookmark something, as a way of hiding a big clump of links. It's a bit inelegant, really, because some of them are relevant to bookmarking, some of them are just hidden in that drop down, and it's a bit of a lazy approach to interface design. And this is just another kind of effort to hide a load of controls. So this is more of a touch-based gesture, as you can obviously tell by the brilliantly drawn hand there. You push the page aside, and a bunch of controls appear that let you perform certain actions. Again, I don't think that this is the way to go. The idea of having a big chunk of interface that's just, we don't really know what to do with it, so we've just hidden it. I don't think that's very smart design. So, but what it does do, what it does do is it leaves the page completely intact. So for rightly or wrongly, the layout and the rendering of the page that the publisher, as the publisher intended it, is for some reason sacred. We can't mess around and insert things and push and pull stuff around inside the content, or at least that's kind of sort of some of the current thinking. But I don't think that has to be the case. So if you go to the next one. Before I talk about this, browsers like Safari have like a reading view where all of the extraneous non-content stuff is pulled out and you get just purely the content. Well, we've got a really similar idea, but it's kind of takes it the other way. So you've got, this is your normal web page as the publisher intended it. There's just content there. It happens to be 2 images, whatever. If you go into what I've called a verb view, it's like the whole page flips over, and now you get the same content and all the same, whatever clutter the publisher has put on their page, but now you get a bunch of extra controls around those things. So here we've kind of given ourselves a license to really, really interfere with other people's content. So it's a little bit of a mode, so I'm not sure if we're 100% happy with it, but I've called it a view, and now I'm more happy with it. But yeah, so if you imagine a third panel here, this is where the kind of the absolutely stripped down content only view, like Safari gives you. This is the normal view, and then that's the really heavy, you'll want to do stuff with this content sort of view. And that's everything from us, I think. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So both Igor and I actually started out in the blurring the lines between the browser and content. But then slightly later on in the afternoon, we split off and decided to work on the idea of tools for publishers. And then that actually ended up extending into a more of what can we do to take the webintents.org site forwards in order to start affecting some change a bit sooner than maybe some of the other stuff. So one of the first things that we sort of thought about was the idea that there are sort of 4 main areas that we need to be focusing on in terms of like audiences to drive the adoption of web intents. And that, so we've got the users, the end users, the people who are actually using websites that hopefully like web intents would be integrated onto. The service providers, publishers, and browser vendors. So we've already seen some stuff about browser vendor implementations or possibilities. And we wanted to look at the idea of sort of starting right at the very bottom and helping publishers to start implementing web intents now in order to drive up the food chain, as it were, and help drive adoption. So one of the things that we were talking about was the idea of being able to create widgets and plugins, and then maybe look at like pushing those to people like WordPress users, and then maybe start looking at how that might be integrated into maybe WordPress.com, then maybe other platforms, and move slowly up through the publishing hierarchy, as it were. So one of the things is that at the moment, the webintents.org site is very development and technology led. And so it does a good showcase of documenting the API and some of the things that you can do technically with it. But what it doesn't really do at the moment is actually start looking at the different needs of the different types of people in this audience. So we wanted to start looking at like how to pull that out into, well, initially we were looking at publishers. So maybe thinking about a subdomain like publishers.webintents.org, sort of following the model of dev.twitter.com or developer.facebook.com, or some of the pages that are on the adlist.com domain. Then actually the other side of that coin is to do the same thing for suppliers as well. So for both of these audiences, really starting to look at like what is the core proposition, what is it that Web Intents actually brings to this audience in order to deliver some value and really help them want to understand why they should want to implement web intents and why it's a good idea. So if I just talk a little bit about what we sort of envisaged for publishers.webintents.org, the idea of having a bit more of a homepage purely for publishers, and again, like I said, conveying this core proposition, and then links through to the documentation from that. Because at the moment, if you just go to the documentation, it's like, this is just documenting an API. I mean, sorry, that's, but it can be made an awful lot more appropriate for a certain type of audience, like publishers. So selling it in that format first, and then giving them the ability to deep dive into documentation that will help them with implementation. And then the other thing that, the other main thing that we thought that would be very useful, and is already sort of, there's prior art for it, is the idea of snippet generators, or things that help you do the cut and copy and paste of code into sites so that people can implement these things quickly and easily without having to worry. Then we asked Paul to come and join us, and we talked about the idea of having repositories, keeping it all up on GitHub and stuff. And there is already a lot of code up on GitHub in a repository. So maybe driving people through to that and starting to actually get a bit of a community, starting to get some feedback, maybe even some pull requests and stuff. So that's about it for publishers for the moment. And then for suppliers, it's kind of the same thing. But when we were in the browsers, blurring the line between browsers and content, one of the things that we talked about was the idea of going to Photoshop.com and there being a call to action to say, use Photoshop anywhere. And so these suppliers are going to want to be able to brand that and put this into marketing and landing pages and campaigns and things like that. And the creative is going to be different in every case. But the snippets and the code behind it that drives that should be common, so that there's just a really easy way to just go and make yourself ready for web intents, or web intents ready. So again, it's just making sure that really focusing on the needs of a specific audience. So obviously this is just waffling around the problem a little bit. So what can we actually do to start driving this forwards? Well, I'm quite keen to get some stuff up on the wiki and basically talk about a few different levels, going from like the sort of just in your brain through to making it concrete and actually delivering it. And it's kind of based around Jesse James Garrett's 5 planes. So talk about the background, where we are now, then the strategy, where would we like to be, and also are there any examples of prior art, who are we solving these problems for? And then start talking about the scope. And the scope at the moment really is like developing a website and some tools for publishers and also for suppliers on subdomains of webintents.org, so that they can actually help, so that they can implement these aspects of web intents. They don't need to worry about whether if they're publishers, they don't need to worry about whether suppliers exist, or if they're suppliers, they don't need to worry about whether publishers exist and that are going to be driving traffic. They just need to know that they are ready for this thing that is coming, which is Web Intents. And it's a totally decoupled system. There's no kind of dependencies, so that's all good. So we can then start looking at like structure. So I've already sort of talked about some pages that we might look at, but it's worthwhile us doing like a bit of a competitor analysis and start looking at things like Twitter and Facebook to sort of see how they've gone about solving some of these other problems as well, and then blending that into the sort of high-level user journeys if there are any in terms of diving through different pages, or even just in diving through how you go about generating the snippets to actually embed into your pages. And then, yeah, start looking, doing a little bit of wireframing, and then getting through to the visual design of the actual pages as well. So there are a number of things which are actually blocking doing this. And by looking at it this way, it helps us kind of surface those, and that means that we can start to actually solve these problems. We need to get a good, solid definition of what the core proposition of Web Intents is, and that needs to be frameable for each one of these different audiences. So for users, for publishers, suppliers, or for browser vendors, why should they be getting involved in actually implementing Web Intents? If we're going to start trying to really push like Web Intents as a destination, I think it does need like a little bit of design love, and maybe starting to pull it all together in terms of like some iconography and visual style as well. I know that this is kind of a bit around the edges, but it would be something that kind of would help move it beyond just the quite developer documentation style that it currently has. And this does also lead us into like trying to solve problems for the iconography that would live inside of the widgets that would be implemented on these sites. And then if we are going to try and gain some traction and look for like the low-hanging fruit, then I really think that WordPress is a good place to start. And that means that need to try and sort of pull in and attract some talent to sort of help deal with creating WordPress plugins, and so that's obviously, you know, PHP developer required with esoteric WordPress knowledge. So, but I think that would be really handy. And then, yeah, there's a GitHub account already, so that's kind of cool. That's not really so much of a blocker. But obviously, this does also afford us a couple of happy accidents, which includes, you know, if we're going to start solving these problems now in terms of visual design, then they can be applied to all kinds of problems as we move along through the life cycle of like Web Intents as technology and its adoption. So that is all quite rambly and waffly, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of an idea, and maybe it's something that we can kind of rally around and start moving things forward right now. So, thoughts? Cool.
Okay, so we sort of framed our thinking today by, first of all, trying to basically break down all of the actors that we thought participated in this kind of a, I should really turn that off whilst until we get to that. And yeah, never show people the stuff whilst you're still talking, you know, never distribute your handouts. So we've kind of framed our like thinking by thinking who are all the actors in the whole sort of Web Intents ecosystem. And we kind of, our list that we came up with was publishers, users, service providers, the collation agencies, stuff like, you know, share this and add this, content owners, which might not be publishers, might be slightly different, advertisers and user agent providers. So quite a kind of big spread of things. And we were specifically thinking about publisher provider issues. So we started kind of brainstorming the kind of actors around publishers and providers, and we figured that actually personas were a really good way to articulate all of the kind of pros and cons of Web Intents to these different kind of groups. So that's actually what we've got. And we've got 4 just to kind of talk through quickly. And we felt that this could actually be quite a nice, not only just quite a nice deliverable, but quite a nice thing for other people to take away and kind of use as tools when they're continuing to think about this. So, you know, once this is out there, hopefully it'll prove to be a useful thing. So I'm going to start by talking about our blogger, our content provider, basically. Here we've got Jolie. She's 19. She's in the UK. She's a fashion, she's a textile kind of design student. And she's a fashion blogger. She loves fashion. She's been writing about fashion online for like 3 or 4 years. She's built up a fair following. In fact, she makes about maybe £150 a month or thereabouts through her AdWords. So she really wants to try and kind of extend her reach to as far as she can, because more cash means more shoes for her, critically. This is very important for Jolie. So yeah, her goals are she wants to expand her audience so she gets more revenue. She also wants to be able to access and edit content really quickly and easily. And she doesn't want to have to learn anything. She's not techie. She doesn't want to have to ask her boyfriend, for instance, to help her out with anything. It's her website, so that's really important to her. Her aspirations for Web Intents, well, she wants it to be as easy as possible. She wants to be able to grab images from sites that she sort of surfs around, crop them, tweak the colours, and post them to her blog without having to think about anything else. She wants it to be really snappy. She doesn't want to have to buy or install Photoshop, or she doesn't want to spend money. She doesn't have that kind of cash. She's a student. So yeah, just as simple as possible. Her concerns about it, well, she thinks that it might not be obvious to her users that they can share content and spread this stuff around if it starts to be kind of a control which is in the browser as opposed to in the page. Easy to overlook for her readers, and she's got a lot of younger readers as well. They might not be particularly savvy online, so that's kind of a big issue. And she wants her readers to be able to see what their friends have done, so that she can leverage the kind of social proof factor and leverage the social graph a little bit more. So those are her kind of concerns about the issue. And next, we've got Kevin. So Jim, if you could, do you want to take the mic? I think that's probably all right.
Take this one because you might want to do
Let's kind of pass it around then.
Can you hear me? Great. So next one was a service provider. So this is Kevin. He's 28. He's a senior product manager at Pin It Up, wink, in San Jose. This is some bio details about him. He's been there for a while. He's a tech guy. He's engaged, has a dog he brings to work. He's a go-getter. He's all about this service he's building. He wants to grow it really fast and really, in his case, really redefine image sharing and curating. So his goals are he wants to integrate it everywhere. He wants to build traffic, repeat users, time on site. He wants to build recognition for his brand, and he wants to try to eventually break into the mobile market, and that's important to him. So aspirations and concerns. So aspirations. He wants to let his dev team basically use this to help him grow, to let people share images directly to their boards. And so he'd be really excited about being able to extend that functionality into, say, clients. Their audience is a little more web savvy. They like to use some of the more modern browsers, so that's really attractive, that something like image sharing, image editing could be built in. Web Intents would know when their users like to use Pin It Up or when they want to do image sharing, and so that whole connection would create a kind of interaction that isn't always immediately obvious on the page, so that would be really exciting. And then Web Intents in general just will help him integrate into browsers, and that may eventually help him break into the mobile space. He's not sure, but that sounds really attractive. So that was that. So as far as concerns go, he's got a Pin It button, and he's not really sure how that would fit into the framework. While he would expect to get more traffic from browsers and mobile, right now at least his traffic's coming from pages, and he's going to want to know whether or not that's going to mean a decrease or an increase, and is it one or the other. So he'd want to kind of understand how that works. And then right now he's using Google Analytics to track all of his metrics, including social interactions on his site's pages. And are those going to show up in GA, or are they going to happen, even if they happen, for instance, in a browser that doesn't necessarily support? So Safari, IE is a big part of his, just 57% of his traffic, and so that would be a concern for him as well. So that's the service provider. Next.
So I just
I don't know who's next.
down. Okay. What have we got next? Nothing at all. Brilliant.
So where'd they go?
Is it
Return button?
no,
Technology.
I was doing it off my memory key. I think that's probably it. I yanked it. Just take a moment.
It's me. Okie dokie. This is our big publisher. This is Chris Whitaker, who works for the Mail Online, and apologies to anyone who knows anyone who works there or does work there. Basically, I don't think we've got it here, have we?
No.
There is, oops, hello. There is the Mail Online, and you can see that there is already quite a lot there to do with sharing. So, for example, here, and further down in particular articles. So they're already fairly clued into how to share. And they're also fairly clued into how to keep people on the site. They don't really want people to go away. So, back to Chris. He's been there since it began, and he's gone with the Mail Online to, it's now one of the world's leading online newspapers. So he's fairly concerned that, given that he's got a social media strategy that works, he doesn't really want to do that much that's going to, he doesn't want to change it that much unless it's going to be a change for the better. He's got to be assured that it's going to work. So his goals are basically to increase the time on site and the activity of users who visit the site, the amount of traffic, including via social networks. So he wants to be sure that any sharing that's done is going to bring people back in to the site. So he wants to be sure that if stuff gets shared on Facebook, it's going to be shared in such a way that's going to get people back there. He wants to get people to register so he can get demographic information about people, so that if people actually are going to be using web intents, for example, to share content, for example, pull out an image or anything like that, he wants to know if they're logged in, how old they are, what gender they are, their location. Because in that way he can get increased advertising revenue. He wants to keep his visitors' interactions on the site. So if people are going to be doing sharing, he doesn't want them to be bounced off or even bounced away from the browser. He wants to keep them there and keep them reading and keep them reading, because he wants to keep the page impressions going, the advertising impressions going. And he wants to increase the use of user-generated content. So he wants good commenting, and better interaction on the site. He doesn't want the discussion going off onto Facebook at all. He wants to keep it all there. So his hopes for web intents, if they do what he would like, is he wants increased sharing of their content, either via the page or via the browser, but he also wants to be able to track it. If stuff gets shared or saved for later, for example, in Instapaper, that's not a great deal of use. Or if it's shared into a feed reader, it's not a great deal of use to him if he's not getting the advertising revenue, or if he can't track it, if it's going away from what he's doing. And it must be easy. So as you saw there, there's there's an easy way of sharing there, even on the home page, even on the article summary. If you go deeper into the article, it's got the buttons up the top, it's got the buttons down below, it's got the Facebook icon and the social proof readout, so that 42 of your friends also like this article. And frankly, if he can, and if he doesn't have to do anything in terms of technology, he wants to be able to ensure that if you've got an image on the page, if you've got video on the page, and if you've got content, that they're all instantly identified as being shareable. If he doesn't have to do anything, then so much the better. And if you can get RSS to work, then it might boost subscriptions. So his real concerns are, does it provide him with any new analytics? They've got analytics. They've got analytics from several sources, from Google Analytics, from Omniture, and they've got their own inbuilt analytics as well. He doesn't want to find out that these clicks can't be tracked anymore. He doesn't want to find out that the additional data that he can gather from the pages isn't there anymore. He doesn't want any of the branding, any of the My Services, like people want to Facebook it. He doesn't want any of those to be hidden. Yeah, and his concerns are that if it goes into a feed reader, then it's basically, it may as well not be on the site. And the addition of any code to the page, however small, however trivial, has got to go through a period of testing, it's got to go through a period of review, and it can't break anything. So any code over hundreds of thousands of pages is going to have an overhead. And basically, and probably most importantly, he doesn't want to get there and find his users are saying, "Where's Facebook gone?" So that's Chris.
Let's hope. Din, 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 din. Yay! Okay, I'll turn this on. There you go. No, that's it. Hello. Yeah, where was I? She wants to enable customers to be notified of new relevant stuff that she's selling, and enable customers to save times for later review and action. Don't know what that means. Okay, and she wants to be able to easily update her catalogue online, including imagery. So using some of the web intents functionality on the CMS, as well as not just the users. Her aspirations to make it easier for payments, perhaps. She hates PayPal, like a lot of people. She's hoping that would make it easier, particularly when she considers that she's got customers from around the world. It would let customers share in a way which works for them. Using RSS, customers could be notified, which again works for them. She doesn't want to use Photoshop, which previous persona said. She's worried that she may not be able to track these word-of-mouth actions. I guess this is Marion before. She's worried about time and expense of implementation. So again, the previous persona had that. She wants to know whether or not she need a merchant account. Will this pay web intent require some new system? How will it work? I don't want my web page cluttered with buttons I can't control. So again, she wants some control over this experience, and she doesn't want to confuse my not particularly technical customers with stuff they don't understand. So hopefully I can just about read. And in summation, from my point of view, and I'll hand it back to Rob, who's over there, this is just us making it up. So this is the first draft of personas, and hopefully other people could take these and validate or otherwise with actual user research and find out if it makes sense. But I think it's quite interesting because, particularly like the last persona, the publisher, his needs are quite different from what we're discussing from a user's point of view, and we have to bear that in mind. So Rob, do you want to?
Just to kind of sum up, Darren, do these seem real to you? Do these feel like real examples of these kind of users? Do we actually even know? Is it sort of just a complete unknown at the moment? Yeah. Question.
I think it's a good place to start, and they could be extended. There could be other personas as well. So.
There's no doubt. I mean, we kind of focused on the...
There will be other personas, but I like the idea that it's somewhere to start the conversation, and these are good hypotheses, and then it's a chance to go and validate them and find whether it works or or whether it doesn't work.
Well, the kind of next question is: are these things actually useful if that was to be done? Do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Someone wrote an article recently about how a lot of social web type projects have failed. Lots of different ones around, how you integrate systems together. And one of the biggest things it was a university research paper. One of the biggest things that they pointed out in the conclusion was that people seem to miss off one actor in a whole row. So you've got a food chain of people. Yeah. I don't like using the word food chain, but a food chain of people that you miss off the needs of one of those groups. You actually break the chain and the whole thing falls to pieces. So actually capturing the persona is really interesting because it actually brings and forwards all those needs. And when you check everything off, you should then go through it and go, actually, have we done it right for everybody? Is it going to be okay for everybody?
Stuff articulated.
Yeah.
What was really cool as you went through the exercise was that
some of the things that are, will I see this button, or will this be here or there, that sort of thing. Maybe over time, and maybe in the bigger picture, some of the kinds of interactions that theoretically could be facilitated, like being able to buy something or being able to edit an image, or some of these things that are more beyond what people can today think about doing with the web page, are really incredibly exciting. So maybe there's a way to get over some of the initial things and get to some of the really exciting interactions. So it was a really solid exercise for us.
Yeah. Terrific. Fantastic.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, so we were looking at linguistics and sort of stuff like that, and sort of maybe the proposition. Motivations around why people would want to actually do this. So one of the things that we were looking at was how do we find the right balance between privacy and usability, and we came up with really basically just 2 design principles. Provide a branded share button that works alongside the NASCAR button, so you still keep that social proof, and you sort of piggyback on the technology that people are already using, and then gradually switch people's behaviour. Allow services to identify themselves when, what does that say? When picked. So once a user selects a service, it's sort of fairly legitimate to then ping the site back to say that service has been used, and we were sort of quite happy with that. We then went on to sort of look at the linguistics behind it and what do we call the buttons, and this sort of turned into quite a long-winded discussion about like the verbs and what do they mean. So I think the most valuable thing here that we've come up with is this table at the bottom, and actually describing the action. And we got a bit caught up in the fact that this is language that we're talking to developers about, so we wanted to make it quite clear that this is what a developer sees. It's not necessarily what the end user or the customer sees. So even though, say for example, pick here is called pick, that's the developer verb that you use, and publishers should be implementing it in such a way that it talks to their audience. So I think this is something that we're going to write up and put on the wiki. We also added another 2 down at the bottom, authenticate, so sign in, log into a service, and pay with, so that would allow you to then pick a payment provider. So you're taking the onus off the publisher or the shop to choose the method you can pay, and you can then pay with PayPal or whatever you want to pay with. I'm just trying to remember what the rest of that is. Can you remember anything else from?
Yeah, just more sort of coming up with the guiding principles, and then trying to sort of identifying the problems. So whether it's contextual to the content type, for example, view. So views to see content, which could be viewing an image or playing some media. So it's sort of view, we'd hit view if you want to play a movie. So it's trying to look around the linguistics of that.
So then the third point that we talked about, and it sort of touches on some of the stuff that you were saying earlier, Andy, about like what's the proposition and how do we explain it. It took us almost till the end of the day to understand how simple it is, and we sort of came up with this little diagram to explain it, that in actual fact it's an HTML action that invokes a browser overlay, which then goes off and calls a service and returns back a service. And in actual fact that's quite simple, but it's just getting that across to people, and trying to distill that down. And Louise came up with this, and she was just like, this is all the interface you need. So I think that's another thing that we're going to sort of try and feed into everything that continues after this. That's it. Cool. Thank you.